This happened to me during the end of 2015 and the beginning of 2016, until I moved due to the fear of living alone in my apartment. For a bit of backstory, I'm a 22-year-old British female. I'd been living in Japan since April 2015. The apartment I first lived in was rented out by a company connected to my school. It was not a good apartment at all, but at the time I didn't know what the general quality and size versus price of Japanese apartments were. I was given one of 5 that I chose before I moved in. The apartment was seriously tiny. It was one room, the kitchen was connected, and the bed was about 2 steps away from it. The length of my whole apartment was about 10 steps, but I was excited because it was my first time living alone, and it was in a country I'd only previously dreamt about living in. After about a month of living and studying in Japan, I met my ex-boyfriend. He told me that the area I lived in was not a good one, and it was known for inhabiting creepy people. He warned me not to walk alone at night anymore, or if I did, then I shouldn't wear headphones and to be very wary. Now that's done, I'll get into the story. I'd been living there for 6 months when my best friend returned to England and moved out. This left me a bit scared because I had noticed previously that the neighbor on my left was a bit odd. He would constantly clear his throat as if he was coughing up a fucking hairball or something. He didn't live immediately next to me, but down the hall. So when I exited my room and looked left, his door was in my view. On the left were stone stairs going up to nothing, and if you went past the stairs, you'd be standing outside his door. And on the left is more hallway and stairs going down. I only took these stairs to do my washing. Otherwise, I always used the stairs on my right at the end of the hall, because the stairs leading to the washing machines were always full of spiders. Fuck that. So my friend moved out, and after that, I noticed this guy a lot more. At this point, I'd never seen his face, but I knew when he was in or out of his place in the evenings, due to the light that would yellow his people if it was on. He still cleared his throat all the time, and despite having space between us, it was loud enough to sound like it was coming from outside my door. That's how loud he did it. To be fair, our walls were crazy thin. I didn't think much of him until I started noticing that when I went outside my door to smoke, his light would suddenly turn off. I didn't think too deeply about it since I would usually go out at night. Maybe he just decided to go to bed, and I coincidentally saw it. Every time. Anyway, one day I went out for a cigarette and saw his peephole go black. I stared at it while I smoked, trying to pick up on any changes in the light to confirm or disprove my theory that he hadn't turned off the light and that it was in fact blacked out by his own face. I was stood up this time for some reason. I usually sat down, but I had a weird feeling this day and stayed standing. I forgot to mention that our doors are metal, so opening them and closing them make really loud noises. I stubbed out my cigarette and put it in my ashtray when I noticed him open his door and start coming out. I was on high alert, so I was a bit panicked, but I thought to myself, he's probably just taking out his trash or something. Then I went cold as I noticed he wasn't holding anything at all. He just stood there facing me. I turned as slowly and naturally as possible to go into my apartment as he started walking. He went past the hall to the stairs and towards my apartment. The path was straight, so if he intended on walking past me, he'd have to keep his feet straight, but he didn't. His walk was angled towards me, and the space between our doors was less than 3 meters. I opened my door and he suddenly started to walk much faster. I got round my door and entered, closing it, and just had enough time to see him lurch towards my door as I slammed it shut and locked it. He stopped outside. I couldn't see him because of my broken peephole. I didn't hear him keep going past my door or going back to his, so I knew he was right there, right on the other side. As I was listening intently, I saw my handle very slightly jiggle. He was trying to open my door with fuck knows what intentions. I waited for maybe 30 seconds before I heard him finally turn back and walk back to his place, and then I heard a door shut. I was extremely panicked at this point, so I called my male school friend and explained everything. He asked if I wanted him to come over, but he lived pretty far from me and it was already late. I told him I'd be okay and he stayed on the phone with me for a while as I calmed down. During our conversation, he asked me to open my door and close it to see if the guy would come out again. I did, opening and closing it hard, listening intently. And to no surprise, I heard his door open and close again after he probably paused and stared, wondering why he'd heard my door but not seen me. After this, I was so scared to be in my apartment at night or go out for cigarettes. I started testing it. I'd leave my room silently, smoke, then close my door normally after I was done and listen. Sure enough, every time I closed mine, I'd hear his door open. I would occasionally hear him come to my door and just stand there. One night I was out smoking, and the creep came home as I was there. I froze still, staring at him from the corner of my eye. He didn't even open his door at first. He just stood there, staring at it for way longer than normal. Another thing that I cannot 100% say was him, but I am pretty sure it was, is that sometimes I would smoke in the stairwell when it was raining, because the rain would hit me when I stood outside my door. I smoked and put my cigarette in my ashtray. It was kind of smelly, so I left it there on the stairwell. I always left it on the third step, the same one I habitually sat on when I smoked there. I left it there tucked in the corner by the wall and went inside. I closed my door normally and went to bed. I knew the people that lived on my right, 1 to 3 doors down. We all used the second stairwell when we went out, and I know for a fact that they don't smoke. On the left of my creepy neighbor's room was a Chinese couple that I didn't know. They and the creep always used the stairs that led down to the washing machines. The stairs I was sat on, as I said before, are not used because they go up to nothing, and they aren't even visible unless you walk around the corner. Anyway, I go back the next morning to get my ashtray, and not only was it a couple of steps up and in the middle, there was a cigarette butt and a scrunched up packet of cigarettes, the same brand that I smoke. I don't know if it was him, but that stairwell is only easily visible to us. This was all happening over the months of 2015 and the beginning of 2016. The thing that convinced me to finally move out was the following. I'd been out for dinner with my boyfriend, and we got back after 11 p.m. To enter the gate at my apartment after 11 p.m., you need a key as they lock it. I was walking faster than my boyfriend, turned a corner leading to my apartment, and saw a figure stood in the darkness near the gate, waiting and watching me approach. He started to appear from the shadows, away from the apartment and toward me. My boyfriend turned the corner, and as soon as this guy noticed him, he pulled his phone out and quite clearly pretended to talk to someone on it. My boyfriend and I walked past, and he slowly followed. I didn't realize at this point that it was my creepy neighbor, but we were silent, both wary of the situation. As I got to the gate, I noticed that it was locked and started searching my bag for my keys. The guy came up, said excuse me, and nonchalantly opened the gate and stood on the other side. I'd found my keys by this point, and he was holding his, ready to lock the gate again. But the guy was stood as if he was waiting to see if my boyfriend would enter with me or not. I showed him my keys, said thank you, and that I locked the gate. He reluctantly left me before my boyfriend had come in, and we watched him go up the stairs, but we didn't see which apartment he went to. When I saw I'd used the washing machine stairs, it clicked that it was my creepy neighbor, and I told my boyfriend. We went up the same stairs slowly. I went first and peered around the corner to where my neighbor lived. He was stood there, waiting, staring at his door, but not opening it. He noticed me come around and turned to me, staring at me until he saw my boyfriend, and then he went inside abruptly. This was the last incident I could handle. I knew he was up to something no good, and I didn't want to wait for anything else to happen, so I decided after that to cancel my contract and move out. Until the day I moved, he still did creepy things. I'd hear him outside my door, or see the black people, and I knew he was staring at me. Let me start this off by letting you know that I was living close to a metropolitan area for a little over a year before moving back to my tiny hometown. Before that, I was at college, other places, and stuff like that. I didn't interact with anyone from my hometown besides family for many years. I even deactivated my Facebook for a few years. Anyway, fast forward to fall of 2020, I moved into a house in this tiny town. One chilly fall night, I decided it was the perfect night to chill and get inebriated off many glasses of wine. I was relaxing on the couch with my girlfriend when we suddenly heard someone knock on the front door. It was around midnight, so she immediately told me not to answer the door. I immediately got up to pull up the blinds on the glass portion of the door to see a meek-looking girl, probably younger than 20, standing on our porch with a blanket and a bag. I was shook by this because in a town like this, there are no homeless people. The town is so small, people usually have a support network when things go sour. I asked her what was going on, and she said she was homeless and needed a place to stay. My drunk self thought it was an amazing time to fulfill my need of helping the world by opening my front door to let her stay in the guest room. My girlfriend immediately sat her down and was asking her questions, but looking back, her answers were pretty vague. Eventually she told us she knocked on every door down the street to find a place to stay because she got into a fight with her mom, so she wasn't homeless. It is also odd to think a young girl would do that, considering the danger. Eventually I find out that she went to the same private school that I went to, from 1st to 6th grade, except the college extension of the same campus. We were kind of bounding on shit-talking the campus, because it's this new age bullshit school run by boomers. But then she mentioned that she had a no-contact order for sitting at the same table as someone at the school. My drunk self did not register no contact meant restraining order. So, we're talking, and then she says that she recognizes me from Facebook. I was alarmed, especially because I've never seen this girl before in my life. We have an almost 10-year age gap. She told me it was because I posted a local rental on the Facebook home share. Okay, that's reasonable. Small town. But then she tells me that she knows my mom. This is alarming because my mom and I have different last names, and she doesn't have any social media or any way to connect us. That was another thing my drunk self registered only the next morning. Fast forward to the morning. She says she's going to leave, and I ask her if she wants a ride because it's cold out. As I drive down the street several miles, I realize she does live on the same street, but she also would have to pass at least 5 developments and many rows of houses to get to my house. Was I really the only one to answer the door, or did she target my house? The next day, my girlfriend and I both discussed how odd that was, and how many things didn't add up. Later in the day, we come back home from the store, and we see the girl in front of our house, again. I'm panicking because I'm horrible with confrontation, and my girlfriend said, "You let her into the house, you deal with it." My girlfriend stays in the car, and I ask the girl what's going on. She asks again if she can stay with us. I panicked and asked my girlfriend to get out of the car. My girlfriend told her that she didn't know if she had a gun or who she was, that she could only stay with us if she opened up to us about everything and why she's not going home. We sat her down in the kitchen and nicely grilled her, only to get vague answers. To be honest, initially I was concerned it was an abuse situation, but it turns out it wasn't. At this point, she's in our house, and we don't know how to get her out. By a stroke of luck, she says she's leaving to go to the dining hall and will come back later. We quickly tapped signs on both the front and the back door that read, "Landlord won't allow additional tenants. Best to go back to your mom's." It's later in the evening and dark out at this point, and we hear banging on the front door, then we hear banging on the side door, and then the back. Finally it stops. We were upstairs and we knew it was her, so we just waited it out an hour. I walked downstairs to check because we were starving and we wanted to use the kitchen. I decided to take one finger and slide one blind shade up from another to peek through the kitchen glass doors. She's standing there, facing me. in the pitch black on my back deck. She was there the entire hour. I looked her dead in the eye and then turned around and went upstairs. Time passed and she eventually left. When I opened the door, we noticed she took the handwritten notes. As the next day rolls by, everybody's mom and cousin is lecturing and laughing at me about opening my door to a stranger, which, to be honest, I would never normally do. But the whole thing wasn't sitting well with me, and I needed more information. I posted something on Facebook about it, and a boy I went to elementary with messaged me, asking if it was Christine, because she had an obsession with him that led to a restraining order. He advised me that she's probably harmless and not to respond to her. She hasn't come back since. I still have no clue why she truly showed up, or how she knew me. It cost me the purchase of a Ring security system, but it could have been worse. This happened around 3 years ago when I was in my first year of university. I was living with 2 other roommates. I was walking home from the station only 15 minutes from our house, and it was only 9 p.m. It wasn't too late, but the area was pretty suburban and didn't have a lot of street light. There were a couple of people that came out of the station with me, but as I walked, I noticed it was only one guy who was jogging. I didn't think anything of it, as I was used to walking that road, but then he starts acting kind of weird. Like instead of crossing the road on the stoplights, he would just jump the rails even though there were cars passing, and he would change his pace a lot. This whole time he was in front of me, so I was kind of keeping an eye already. Then he stopped by a bench to tie his shoelaces, so I ended up walking past him. All of a sudden he runs up behind me, hits me in the head and takes my hat. He continues jogging, and I guess I was so shocked, I just stood there frozen. Then all of a sudden he turns around and starts jogging towards me again, so I ran for it into my nearest gas station. I told the guy behind the counter, and he offered to get me an Uber home. I of course told my roommates so we could be more careful and vigilant. Then, not even a week later, I was walking home and noticed another man looking at me and following me in the same area. So I ran for the gas station again. But before calling an Uber, I saw the man waiting outside. Underneath his hood, it was the same guy. I called an Uber, but had it take me to my school instead, in case he found out where I lived. I was way too paranoid. It got me and my roommates to get the hell out of that house. A few months later, I found out from a friend that there was actually a series of murders happening in that same time and area for Asian girls. It shook me, because I'm Asian. This was many years back when I was still a young teen and around 14 years old. I remember being done with homework and playing on the Nintendo 64 in the living room. I lived in a small apartment, which was technically a refurbished basement of the building. The front door started the living room, where the TV is located. The TV faced inwards, so that meant I would be facing the door at all times whenever playing games. Anyway, when the front door moved, I noticed immediately. I muted the TV and crept towards the door, positioning myself right in front of it. The door started inching itself open, as if someone tried to push it open slowly. After a few seconds, I slammed the door and locked it. I heard a small rustling noise and some jingling sounds. It sounded like either a dog shaking itself dry with some chains hitting each other, or a person shaking a bag full of keys. I was ready to push back with all my 14-year-old might. Luckily, whoever was at the other end of the door stomped upstairs and out the apartment main entrance. I don't know who that was or what they wanted, but I'm glad they didn't try to break in again. I feel quite lucky that nothing else came out of that, but it's still unnerving to think about it. I live in a small town in Denmark with a population of roughly 3,000 people, where nothing ever really happens, and the following scared the entire town to death. Back in 2005, or when I was still in kindergarten, a strange and agitated man who was a father to one of the children came and demanded my teacher that he wanted to see his daughter and take her out of school. My teacher could see in his eyes that something was not right, and that he was extremely upset. He therefore denied him to see his daughter, and after a very uncomfortable discussion, the father eventually gave up. He walked to his car without looking back and drove home. My teacher grew very worried and decided to call the local police to go check on the family's house. Later that day, it was reported on the news that the father had murdered his own wife with a gun, and after that, he ended himself. At the time, my best friend lived next door to the family, and he has since told me that he could hear the mother screaming in a very horrifying way, followed by 3 shots, and then a grown man crying his heart out. 10 seconds of silence, and then finally, 1 more shot. It creeps me out just to think about this, and I feel so sorry for the daughter who was left an orphan at such an early stage in life. I really don't know what would have happened to the daughter if my teacher had not stopped the man taking her home with him. I hope you're having a decent life wherever you are, girl. This happened when I was 3 to 4 years old. It's probably my second childhood memory, and the most vivid to this day. Anyway, we lived in a ground floor apartment suite that faced the front of the building property, right beside the entrance. In this area there was grass and trees and enough space for kids to run around and play. I was standing looking out the patio window, and I saw a little boy and 2 girls playing out front. Suddenly this big burly man with a shaggy long beard runs up and grabs the 2 girls. The boy is kicking and screaming, telling the man to let them go and also calling for his mom. The man got the boy away from him and took off with the 2 girls. The boy ran back into the apartment. For years I brought this up to my parents, hoping they could give me some context or remember anything that happened. They basically tell me I probably dreamt it and it's not real. Last year I mentioned it to my mother, and she says, oh yeah, they were siblings, and that was their dad. He and the mother were going through a lengthy custody battle, and he tried to kidnap the twin girls. She actually said she never wanted to admit I actually saw what I saw, as to not scare me. Okay, Mom, I've spent my entire life having this memory, knowing it was real, and being told it was not. So thanks for the validation, I guess. The girls were returned to their mother, and I assume the father probably lost custody. This happened a year ago, but I still think about it. Me and my friends had the munchies and wanted to go to Taco Bell at 2 a.m., so we took my mom's car and went on our journey. On our way home, though, my friends took a wrong turn and ended up in a cul-de-sac. As we were turning around, a resident on the street gets into his truck and starts pulling out right in front of our car. Us, thinking he's going out somewhere, waits for him to go, but he just sits there for a second before getting out and coming toward the driver's side. He walks up to my friend driving and starts yelling at her to slow down, that she's going too fast down the street, this and that. And then he started banging on my friend's window and tried opening the door. I can see him doing this, so I tell my friend to drive because I don't want to be sitting there anymore. She pulls the fuck off and he jumps in his car behind us. Halfway out of the street, I noticed he was following us. I stuck my entire upper half out the window and yelled at him. At this point, he's chasing us while I'm giving my friends directions back to my house. All of our phones are dead or at 1%. He ends up in front of us and cornered us in another cul-de-sac up the street. My friend is driving in people's lawns to get away. Eventually, he followed us all the way to my home. My friends ran inside to tell my mom. I run straight for the car yelling at him. He asked me what I yelled out of the car, and I said to his face, "You fucking baby-ass bitch." He gets upset and almost gets out of the car when he sees my mom come out of the house. He tries leaving, so I stood behind his truck, shouting out his license plate numbers. She makes it to him, and his entire demeanor changes, acting like he's the innocent one, like he was scared. I was told to go inside, and my mom obviously gives him some words of wisdom. She tells me he followed us home because someone ran over his dog a while back, because they were speeding through his street. But it still gives no excuse to follow teenage girls home. Everyone knows what doing laundry is like. Monotonous work while your brain tries to waste away the minutes it takes for the machine to finish its cycle. Occasionally, having stiff conversations in passing with strangers. This night was no different, at first. As I pulled my laundry out of the dryer and began to fold it on the table, I heard a voice over the lull of my headphones. "Excuse me, are you using this?" The voice came from a man in his late 40s to early 50s. He wore glasses that reminded me of my grandfather. He was wearing a stained, disposable face mask. It hung under his nose and just above his mouth. I could see the start of a dirty blonde mustache poking out. He was gesturing to an empty cart next to the table. I simply said, "No, I'm good. I have one already." And he took it and began loading his laundry and folding it on the table adjacent from mine. Now started the usual routine questions that all lonely older men seem to ask. "What's your name?" "Amy." "Ah, that's beautiful. So how old are you?" 22. "Do you live around here?" "Not really. The town over." I lied. "Did you go to college? What did you study?" "Yes, culinary arts management." "Oh, so you like to cook?" he asked. "Yeah," I responded. I tried to keep the conversation short but lighthearted. As it continued with some short remarks about the wonders of doing laundry, he asked the dreaded questions. "Where do you work? Do you live by yourself?" I hesitated on the questions momentarily, trying to keep my privacy intact without provocation. "Oh, you wouldn't know it. It's a small mom-and-pop restaurant. And no, I don't live on my own." I lied to him. He stopped folding his laundry as I started to load mine into my hamper. He walked over to my table and leaned against the washer so that he was in my eyesight. His eyes squinted slightly as he pulled his mask under his chin, uncovering his face. He then awkwardly called out, "So do you want to go to the movies with me sometime, cutie?" His eyebrows knitted together softly as a wave of different emotions flooded my brain. Confusion as to why he'd even ask. I didn't even know his name. Embarrassment, as he's easily my father's age, and I'm not into that. Shock, because this man doesn't even know what my face looks like. Anxiety, because I have to reject him. I was so thankful for my mask because I'm sure my expression was not one he would have liked to see. I softly shook my head and he copied my actions in tandem. I fumbled out a soft, "No, I'm sorry, I have a boyfriend." I studied his face as I watched his brain process my response. He knitted his eyebrows together and curled his lips. I could see nicotine stains on his teeth. He replied in an eerily soft tone, kind of like how you calm a fussy baby. "Oh, no, you don't want to go see the movies. You have a boyfriend. Okay." He nodded his head with the last word. His eyes widened slightly as they fixated on mine. His voice suddenly grew cold. "It's okay. You don't have to lie to me. It's okay. You don't have to lie to me." Enunciating both don'ts with tinges of anger. Annoyance filled me at his accusation. "I'm not lying. We've been together for a year and a half. I love him." His eyes softened as if he just now realized the other two people in the laundromat. He slinked away, returning to his laundry long abandoned. I looked at him as I pulled my hamper into my arms, and I uttered a small, "Have a nice day." I haven't been back to that specific laundromat, and I don't do laundry alone anymore. I was leaving the gym the other afternoon, and I was awkwardly exiting behind a middle-aged man. He was pretty well dressed to be exiting a gym. He held the door open for me, but then he began keeping pace with me when I headed toward the direction my car was parked in. He began talking to me, just politely at first, and I realized he had a strong accent. It was kind of European. He quickly changed the conversation from normal small talk to asking me if I was single. I quickly said no and tried to speed up. He kept pace with me. He seemed a little upset by this and moved closer to my side as we walked through the parking lot. "Would you leave him for me? You're beautiful. I could take good care of you." I know I made a face because he grinned, like he knew I was uncomfortable, and he was excited by it. "I'm in a happy relationship," I deadpanned. Seeing that my car was just 4 more spaces down, I considered running for it. There was no one else in the parking lot but us. "Would you give me your number?" He had already started taking out his phone. "I'll text you so you'll have mine, in case you change your mind." "No, thank you," I quickly said. "If you'll excuse me." I sped up again, and thankfully he stopped at the car 1 space before where I was parked. I half-jogged to my car, risking a glance back toward him. He was watching me intently. My gut told me he was waiting to figure out which car was mine. As I unlocked the door, I saw him start to speed walk toward me. Sped up by fear, I jumped into my car and immediately locked the doors. I quickly turned my key and threw my car into reverse as he reached my door. Without even checking what was behind me, I hit the gas and pulled out of the space. I saw him pull his phone back out and seemingly take a picture as I accelerated by him. I was shaking with fear as I pulled out of the parking lot. I had no pepper spray and no weapon on me. I don't know what he would have done if he'd had reached me before I could lock my car. I'm afraid he got a picture of my license plate or something. Was it a trafficking attempt or just a creep? Either way, I won't be going back to that gym. In December 2018, my ex and I split up after 7 years in a relationship. I was new to the dating game, so I didn't want to just jump back into it. In February, I met a guy at a bar we regular. The second time I met him, we exchanged numbers. By the end of March, I was feeling pretty comfortable with him and invited him to a party at my house. He stayed after the party, and one thing led to another. Well, after it was all said and done, I had a weird vibe. He was too pushy and it made me uncomfortable, so I asked him to leave. I planned to never speak to him again. That is until he started to text me from random numbers. He would say things like, "Hope you have fun fishing," when I didn't post anything on social media that I was fishing. He also said, "I hope the movie was good," when I hadn't posted anything online that I was at the movies. He would text me and ask me where in the bar I was at different bars, when I hadn't told anyone or posted where I was going. We had no mutual friends, so he was following me. The final straw was when my friends took me to Washington, D.C. for my 25th birthday celebration. We bar hopped all over the city. Around 2:30 a.m., we came out of the last bar we were at and decided to get cookies across the street. As we were coming out of the cookie shop, guess who pops up? You guessed it, he does. He mentions a few bars and said he wanted to say hi earlier, but being as I hadn't replied to his messages, he didn't want to freak me out. I was terrified. My friend's husband thankfully stepped in and called him out. He threatened to call the police on him. I changed my number and moved. Thankfully, I haven't heard from him since. When I was around 6 or 7, I had my own room on the other end of the house than my parents. I was a very anxious child with an active imagination. We lived in an old family farmhouse a couple of miles outside of the town my father grew up in. His family lived near us, all within a couple of miles. My aunt had lived in the farmhouse before we did, before I was born, but she moved out after her and her husband divorced. One night, I woke up and saw a man standing in the corner of my room. I ran to my mom and dad's room screaming. My parents rushed in, and upon seeing nothing, assumed I had a bad dream. I got to sleep with them for the rest of that night. The next night, I woke up and saw the man standing outside my window. Again, I ran to my parents, and again, they saw nothing. This occurred for about 2 weeks, every single night. Sometimes the man would be in my room, sometimes he'd be right outside. My parents never believed he was real. Until one night when I awoke to the man standing above me. He was blocking my path to get out of my room, to even get off of my own bed. I was terrified, and we stared at each other for a long time in silence, before he walked out of my room, straight out of my bedroom door. I finally gained enough courage to race out of my room and wake my parents. By this point, they were tired of the sleepless nights caused by the overactive imagination of their child. I think my dad walked to my room just to comfort me, saying, "No one is in your room, honey. It was all just a dream." Except it wasn't. The large muddy boot prints that stained the floor was proof of the man. Eventually, my dad found out my aunt's ex-husband had been released from the psychiatric hospital where he was being treated, and he returned home. He still had a key to the laundry door. My aunt failed to tell us that she did not change the locks. My aunt's ex-husband suffered PTSD from being a prisoner of war while in Vietnam. He self-medicated and fried his brain. Though we never knew for sure why he did it, he was found deceased soon after in a riverbed. I don't think he meant me any harm. So I was doing some shopping and was making sure I looked good doing it with my fresh cut and winter clothes fresh pressed. I'd been to a few stores already in a shopping strip when I noticed a girl with a camera was at the exit, waiting for me. I'd seen her already in a store I was previously in. When I passed by her, she acted really weird. She turned her camera away from me, the obvious, take a photo and not look like you did a thing, so I faked her out. I went to go inside one store, then doubled back out the second she stepped in right behind me. But when I started turning around, she bumped into me and straight sniffed me. Immediate "what the fuck" spurted out. I walked out, staring her down. She had a really creepy, horny smile and just bit her fist. Oh my god, what the fuck. I got out of there and went straight to my car, which was in a parking structure. I told security about the girl and she was apprehended. I was flagged apart because the security officer confiscated her camera. Cops were there in a minute since it is a shopping strip. There were tons of photos of me. I didn't press charges, but I demanded all the photos were deleted. She did it all while eye fucking me. Today I learned how fucking creepy people can be. I'm a woman, and I was leaving my friend's apartment around 10 p.m. to go back to my car. It was parked on the street around the corner. I had my 12-pound dog with me, and we were walking toward the car. I typically will switch side of the streets I'm walking on to avoid people that look questionable. The life of being a woman, since we always have to be on the alert for that kind of stuff. I'm walking up the empty sidewalk to my car, and a questionable-looking man starts crossing the street. He's walking towards me. There was no reason for him to be crossing the street that I could tell. I had a really bad feeling and decided to turn around and go back to my friend's apartment. As I turn around, I notice he has stepped up the pace and is following me. I call my friend and start yelling, "Come downstairs and let me in. There's a guy following me. You have to be let into our apartment lobby by a resident." Me and my dog are sprinting down the street and I keep looking behind me. He starts running behind me to catch up. He's gaining on me and I'm in a full run. My dog is confused but is trying so hard to move her little legs. Luckily, my friend was down there waiting for me and let me in. We ran in, shut the door, and the guy just walks by as I get the door shut. He starts walking casually like nothing happened and continues on his way. I wait for 30 minutes, shaking and my heart racing. After I calmed down, my friend walked with me to my car this time. I drove her back to her apartment. I have no idea what might have happened, but I've never been so scared for my life. I know this can happen to guys too, but it is sad how every time I'm walking alone, I am constantly on the lookout for being taken, killed, or assaulted. Always trust your instincts, even if nothing happens. It's better to be safe than sorry. Me and my friend had gone to a Waffle House around 10 p.m., and there were a lot of people there. My friend kept complaining about how a guy was staring at her, but she is very striking, and I just thought the guy was eye-flirting with her. Finally, I turn around and look, and chills run down my spine. Absolutely dead eyes, and this man is staring right past me, fixated on my best friend. I thought this was weird because I thought he would look at me since I made it very obvious when I looked at him that I was kind of pissed off. And believe me, it was a real, stop fucking looking at us look I gave him. My friend is kind of panicking because she's just so creeped out, so I just suggested we check out and leave. He's to the right of the register, and I look at him almost the whole time we were checking out. At one point, I got literally right in front of my friend like I was shielding her because she was so stressed. So when I stood in front of her, he started leaning to the side, looking around me, still staring at her. I was pissed because I hate when men feel entitled to make women uncomfortable. And plus his eyes were so wrong. They were just completely black and terrifying. He really had crazy eyes that were really wide open, and he didn't blink for the 5 minutes I was staring right back at him. We peeked at him through the window on the way out of the parking lot, and he was still staring at my friend. It was very creepy, and it reminded me to be aware of everything around me, and to always trust my own or my friend's intuitions. When we feel something is wrong, I just go ahead and assume something really is wrong, and we need to get the fuck out of there. This just happened this week. I was on vacation with my family, and they were driving me insane after 3 days. I decided maybe I'll take a look on Bumble and see if there are any cute locals to meet up with for an hour or two. My family would be checking out some museums, which is not at all my interest. My friends at home also thought it would be a funny story to meet up with a local. For reference, I'm a 25-year-old woman. I was with my parents and younger sister for a week. We were in a remote-ish area in a small town out west. We were visiting a lot of national parks, so there weren't a lot of people nearby on the apps. I started swiping and soon came across a guy who was my age and looked cute. He had similar interests to me, so I felt like I'd be down for a meetup with him. We started talking on the app, and then eventually moved to Snapchat. He suggested we go to the next town over to see fireworks. I couldn't that night since I had plans with my family. I was also hesitant about meeting a guy 30 minutes away when I was already put out of my element, and we were in what felt like the middle of nowhere. He knew I was there to do hiking in parks, so he suggested we go for a local hike nearby the next day. For an important side note, I deleted my last name on Snapchat before he added me, so he doesn't know it. I don't know if I had a bad feeling in the back of my mind or what, but I didn't want him knowing much of my information. However, it did show his last name, which is important for later. I had hesitations about going into the woods with a random guy, especially since I'd been around the hiking trails the day before. My cell service was cutting in and out, but the trails were populated, and I did want to see more out there. My family was going to go to a museum that day that I had no interest in, so I agreed to meet him the next day. That night, I got a bad feeling. I kept getting nervous about meeting a random Bumble man far from home. and in an area I don't know too well. Even though my family knew where I would be, I was feeling uncomfortable and decided maybe I should just Google this guy and see what other information I can find out about him. Things like his Instagram or LinkedIn. I wanted to give my family his information while I was gone, in case anything happened. I also wanted to verify what I knew about him, like his workplace and alma mater, that kind of thing. Well, I type in his first and last name and the town we're in Google, and I click on the first link. The next thing I know, I'm looking at a registered sex offender profile. His full name, address, photo, description of his offenses, and it was fairly recent. I'm not sure if I can go into detail about his offenses, but I can assure you that had I not Googled this man, things could have turned out very, very badly for me. Or maybe not, but nonetheless, I'm shook that I almost met up with a registered sex offender. Please make sure to do your due diligence when meeting people off of the internet. I thought a lot about sharing this experience, and I finally decided to tell it. When I was about 4, I went to the pharmacy with my mom. Now keep in mind that the area where the store was located was a middle-class, peaceful neighborhood. So, as my mother was buying what she needed, an old man entered the store. He was probably in his late 60s or early 70s. I remember that when I was waiting for my mom to finish shopping, I started doing some ballet moves. When the man saw me, he complimented my ballet moves, and he told me he has a niece at home who also takes ballet classes. I remember the man asking if I wanted to go meet his niece and play with her. As the naive child that I was, I said yes. The man told me to follow him. As we almost reached the exit of the store, my mom calls my name. I go to her, leaving the old man behind. I did not realize that it was a dangerous situation until I was older. I asked my mom why she didn't react earlier when she saw the man taking me with him. My mom tells me that she was going to save me, but she wanted to see if I would follow the man. Looking back at this, I realize how lucky I am for my mom and how vicious the incident was. So my mother went to the grocery store yesterday. She was looking over a young woman's shoulder to look in the frozen food freezer. The woman kept looking at my mom like she was trying to remember something. She turned around and told my mom, "You look just like my best friend Catherine's mom." She asks my mom what her name is, and she says, "Carrie." The other woman says, "Yes, my friend's mom is named Carrie." Then the other woman asked my mom if she worked at the hospital because she remembered seeing her. My mom said yes, that she was a medical coder. The young woman nodded and said that Carrie knew she was a coder from the hospital. My mother didn't recognize this woman, but thought that she knew me or had seen her at the hospital. However, when my mom asked where this Carrie worked, it was a completely different hospital in a different part of the state. So this other Carrie looks like my mom, has the same career as my mom, has the same name, and has the same daughter as my mom. Talk about coincidence. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that one. Do me a favor and like the video and drop a comment. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button to always stay up to date with my latest videos. I want to give a shout out to my patrons and channel members for supporting the channel. So a huge thanks to Absinthe Alice, Art and Gaming, Sarah P, Rochelle, Christopher, Pretty Girl 215, Christy, Crafty Kel, Kay, Something Edgy, Borderline Betty, Spider's Web, Ooh La La Andrea, Lady Drackard, Sue, Monique, Sean Gorman, Casey Lewis, Sarah T., Linda, Austin, Tegan, Chris and Donna, Erin, Jennifer, Gabrielle, Misanthropia, Ryan, Astara Rain, Rudy, Christina De La Rosa, Noosh, Fire05, Jody, Kathleen Fenton, James Gargano, Gemma Allen, Monica Levelace, and Alex. If you want to check out the perks of my Patreon channel memberships, or you want to submit a story, all my links and social media can be found in the description below. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you all in the next one.